Hi, my name's Leonie Bolt, and I went from high school troublemaker and long-time backpacker to accidental entrepreneur. After 15 years working as a professional photographer and running my own studio, I grew into becoming a personal empowerment and business mentor to help other women to follow their passions and find their purpose too. I've learnt to pave my own way through life, and now I empower others to do the same, to break through their limiting beliefs and empower them to shine. Welcome to the Empowered to Shine podcast, where we dive deep into creating a life by your own design. Hello, and welcome back to the Empowered to Shine podcast. Our guest today is Becky Paroz, and she is a very inspirational human being. Becky and I both did a chapter recently in a book called The Changemakers, or just Changemakers, and I just reread her story this morning because I just wanted to dive a little bit into that with you guys today. Becky, introduce yourself. Let us know a little bit about you.
Hi, Leonie, and thank you very much for having me today. It's great to be here. I can't do a 30-second pitch because it just doesn't all fit. So I'll do the quickest recap I can. Really, really poor childhood, abusive drunk father, and all the dysfunctionality that comes with that. From that, stepped into the engineering construction world. Which, it has its own challenges, let alone with childhood like I had. Spent a lot of years exploring who I was and what my passions were and, what was wrong with me, as I'm sure we all do, to come out to the other side with 30 years of an amazing career, award-winning leadership roles on iconic projects, published author in a myriad of anthologies and books and magazines around the world. And just kind of embracing supporting other people, mainly because there was no one there for me, and having to do that journey on my own was lonely. And that includes my career as well as my own personal journey. So I'm a qualified coach of 20 years. I've been mentoring women and business women and leaders in my own industry for about 15 odd years now. And everyone's kind of, where do you find the time to fit all this in? But I have dogs, not children, so at least I can throw my kids outside for a while. So I've lived a full life and packed as much in as I can to the time I've had, and I kind of got to 40 and went, oh, that's the bucket list. Time to come up with a new one. It's been a busy full life, and I can't explain really how amazing it's been to have curated a life when you kind of had the start to life that I did. So that's what we're here to talk about, I guess.
Absolutely. So you said in the start of your chapter in the book, some of my experiences, not the result of my circumstances. So
Yes.
I know what you were referring to is obviously growing up in a domestic violence sort of situation, being instilled with the fact that you're not worth anything and having to recover from that with all of those things that you've been instilled in you as a child, and the belief systems and your self-worth and self-belief, and then having to, as you grew older, grow into yourself and realize that you were worth living. You were capable of living a full life and making a success of yourself. And obviously you went into engineering, which was probably very, very male dominated when you went into it. So I can imagine the sorts of things you would have had to deal with then and getting through that. But I know that you didn't really celebrate your successes along the way either.
No, because I didn't know what that looked like. And for me, they weren't successes then. Because of all the things you mentioned, as you said, not worthy as a child, constantly told, selfish, no value other than of service to him in particular. And then, chose an industry that basically gave me the same messages. You don't belong. We don't want you here. People wonder how I am, who I am. and getting through that. And look, I still don't really have all of the answers today, but that's what a lot of my self development has been about. And yeah, I have a lot of theories as to why, and I can, have a lot of discussions about it all. But that is exactly what the journey was: is how to get from not worthy and not even knowing, like people talk about worthy like it has meaning. For me, I actually had to figure out what that meant before I could
Mm,
then embrace whether I owned the label or not. And I find that's actually a problem with a lot of the self-help and self-development books, and hence why I wrote my own, because a lot of them start with the premise, just believe in yourself, know that you are worthy, and then build from there.
mm,
Um, for people who come from a background like mine, that statement is not able to be understood. It has no relevance, it has no meaning, it has no context in the life that I'd been taught, and as you said, the mindset that I'd been trained into. So a lot of my journey was actually discovering what worth is, and that
mm,
has, that ties back into not being able to celebrate successes until a long time down the track, and realizing that that's what they were. Because for me, it was always that next thing and that next thing and that next thing. I was challenged at some point to go and get some hobbies and do something other than my job, because that's all I had in my life and that's where I attached all my value, which was great advice. But what that meant was I went and did a hobby, and then I did that hobby, and then I went and got another hobby and did that hobby. So I just became more achievements rather than the idea of a hobby as something you explore and enjoy and do for fun. It took me a
yeah.
really long time to discover that doing something for fun is the value in and of itself. And so that's been a really interesting part of my journey, is learning that achievement and success can be celebrated in the moment and on the day, and for really small things as much as the big things along the way. And that celebrating success actually engenders more success, more celebration, and it kind of becomes a snowballing effect and a practice that you then, embrace as habit, rather than something you kind of get to the end of the year and go, oh, look, I've achieved another year. Quick, celebrate. All right, pop a glass of wine. Pip, pip, quick, next achievement, which is kind of what I was doing. So, yeah,
Yeah, well,
that's
I
where
guess celebrating your successes is a really good positive mindset tool, because otherwise you're just ticking things off the boxes.
that's
Sometimes you
what I
don't
was
even know
doing.
why you're ticking these things off. Sometimes it
Yes.
might be a house or a car, or getting that degree, or whatever it looks like,
Hmm.
and you kind of get there and go, oh, what did I do that for?
Yeah,
What
which was the
where
hobby
was
thing,
the value in that?
Exactly. I went and did ceramics because it's a hobby, and I made these things, and I graduated my course. I was like, great, now what?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that kind of realization is like, some people do that because they like it, not because they're ticking off an achievement. And that's, yeah, you're exactly right with it. It's a tick list to go, right, done that, next. Instead of actually just being in the moment and enjoying the process and embracing that act of creation in whatever way that creation manifests, and
Mm.
that being enough in and of itself, instead of the tick box of achievement. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I know you've obviously been through a very personal journey of finding your way through self-development, and you've probably bought a lot of books and been to a lot of seminars and a lot of courses, like
All of them.
like
All of them.
many of us
Seminar
have.
junkie for a good few years there, yes.
I'm sure you've done a hell of a lot more than most of us with the journey that you've been on, and you've had to self-manage that journey. You've
Mhm.
not really had anybody to kind of guide you through that experience.
No.
What's What do you think really helped you? I know you've probably had a lot of people of inspiration along the way, but what do you think, out of everything that you've taken, what really helped you?
So surprisingly, not a lot of people inspiring me along the way.
Mhm.
Um, I I'm not one to look outside myself, I suppose. And when I did, obviously not a lot of women in engineering, so nothing really to look forward to there. Certainly 30 years ago, not a lot of women in powerful positions to kind of look up to and aspire to. Not, the networks and support groups and industry groups and everything that sort of, support women weren't around then. So it was very lonely, very alone, very
Mm.
self-driven. Um, And so it was like you said, yeah, very much an inner self-driven journey. And yes, all the seminars, and yes, all of that. What I used initially was anger, because I was a very angry young lady, as it goes. Clearly from my childhood, and then obviously being told I didn't belong in my career. And the other part that happened was I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis at age 18, fired from my job as a result of that at age 19, which was actually my lifeline to my degree and all sorts of things. So that was very demoralizing. And 3 months later, the Disability Discrimination Act came in. So there was no recourse back then.
Mm-hmm.
That's how old I am, yes. So I had a lot of anger. And one thing I suppose that being a bit of an engineering and sciencey nerd, was that anger is energy.
Mm-hmm.
So if and look, I didn't know this at the time, and there's been a lot more study and a lot more books about it, I suppose. But at the time, I kind of realized that anger was energy, and it was energy that I could use negatively or positively. So I channeled my anger into a lot of motivation, and they call it FU energy, um, which is a technical term for I'm going to do it despite the fact you said I can't, and use that to kind of prove everybody wrong. Which I don't recommend as a long-term strategy, but certainly
Yeah.
as a short-term strategy to kind of get you out of that funk and move on from where you are. It's energy that was available to me, so I used it. So that was the first several years, and I had a lot of feedback because I was a very angry young lady. I'm like, well, no shit.
Yeah.
Um, but also, having to take that on board and learning how to manage the manifestation, in that, in a male dominated world, when the men get angry, that's okay because they're
Mm-hmm.
being forceful and taking charge. But when a young woman does it, it's very aggressive, which
Yeah.
of course would only make me angrier.
And you just
Um,
being a
Yeah,
bitch.
oh, and well, yeah, funny you should mention that. I have Queen Bee in my business name, and I tell everyone the B does not stand for Becky, and it is a capital for a reason. Because of that, if I had $1 for every time, I would not need to work ever again. And look, I use that. So I use that as a motivator. I didn't take it on board as something that was negative. I actually took it as a positive. It's like, well, if I'm being a bitch, I'm doing my job properly. And that became a phrase I've actively used. There are plenty of people who know me who know that phrase. It's like, I've had senior people in suppliers call me that in meetings. I've been sitting around meetings, there's been blokes there, and they're like, oh, do you have to be such a bitch? And then they looked around for male support. And all these
Yeah.
guys are like, we work with her. So, yeah, you don't get any sympathy. And I tell them, I said, if I'm being a bitch, that means I'm doing my job properly, because you're not listening to me and you need to.
Yeah.
Possibly there was a few other words in there, but we call those construction words.
Yes.
Um, so it was something that I kind of became a part of my identity in some ways. It's like, well, if you're going to call me that, I'm going to be that.
Own it.
Yeah, exactly. Like I don't have a problem with that word, or in fact, other words that women get called. It's a case of, well, I can repurpose that and
Mm-hmm.
turn it back around on you. And the other side of it is, well, you can either have that persona, or you can actually pull your head out of your other hole, and we can work together. So I can either be your best friend and ally, or I can keep being Queen Bee. So yeah, so that then became sort of the next phase of the journey, is learning how to channel the anger appropriately, and that's where I became this very sarcastic, attitudinal young lady, and started to broaden I suppose, my communication techniques. And I found that actually far more valuable and far more useful, because when you can make people laugh, albeit, sarcasm, and still giving them feedback in a certain way, the ability to kind of laugh it off is far more collaborative than just telling them they're being a hole. So yeah, so the communication that went along with my journey was actually one of the most useful skills that I've leveraged.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the most important skills in life, is learning to channel that energy, whether it's anger, whether it's fear, whether it's anxiety, into something more positive.
Yeah,
Because at the end of the day, like you said, it is all energy, and we become a product of our emotions. But generally they're externally inflicted, and
Mhm.
we can take them however we want, but being able to then flip the switch and turn it into something positive, or
Yep.
channeling that energy into something creative, or whatever that looks like for you, I think that's probably one of the most important skills that we as human beings can learn. Don't you agree?
Absolutely. It's alchemy, it's transformation, it's change maker, it's all that sort of stuff in kind of taking this position and this emotion that whether external, internal, or a combination of both, and transmuting it into something that actually adds value, increases positivity in your life, frankly, is the best form of revenge.
Mm-hmm.
It's especially when you're in that environment where people are trying to actively shut you down or put you in your place or turn you into something that you're absolutely not. Transmuting all of that negativity into something that drives you closer to you and your goals is utterly the best form of living, the most satisfying way of achieving a whole lot of, thanks for your input, see you later, I'm moving on with my life. And yeah, like I said, the best form of revenge, and I've always said that the best form of revenge is being successful and living well despite what people have to say about you.
Absolutely. And the reason they
Mm.
get upset with you is because you're
Excuse me.
you're getting better at what you're doing, you're being more successful, you're putting yourself out there,
You're
and they're
not
not
fitting into that
comfortable with
box that
that.
they want you to be in. Absolutely, yeah.
That's right. It's making them uncomfortable because they're seeing you as a threat all of a sudden.
Yes, there's nothing so terrifying apparently as a very intelligent young lady who's not afraid to speak her mind.
Oh, fabulous. I love it. Excellent. So I know that in your journey, you have had a few episodes of really deep depression. And I
Mhm.
know a lot of people at the moment are going through, I know some of the conversations I have on the phone with my clients, there's a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, a lot of um, being very unsure about
Yep.
where things are going in their life. How did you manage to channel that into something to keep you going?
Tough question. Because the short answer is I don't really know.
Hmm.
But it comes back to that sort of inner resilience, the inability for me to give in, stubbornness. Particularly when I was diagnosed with arthritis, it was very obvious my choice was check out or check in.
Hmm.
This is not something that's going to get cured. This is not something that there is treatments that are effective out there in the market, particularly for younger people, and even then the society persona of people with arthritis is it's old people's disease, and it's really not. And all of that kind of overwhelming input to being very young, and like 19 is the start of your life, and here I am with a disease that you're supposed to get at the end of your life. So very
Yeah.
easy to translate into, well, that must mean it's the end of my life. And a lot of the feedback externally from looking at like community groups and places that I sourced to try and get some support, it was overwhelmingly give up. Change what you're doing, don't worry about it, do something different, just don't worry. I'm like, I'm 19 and I'm not prepared to give up. And again, it came back to that transmuting that energy. So again, even depression and that sort of space of, I call it the nothing. There's no emotion, no feeling, no nothing. Um, it's still energetic, and it really just it became a choice of, well, I'm either going to stay here, and if I'm going to stay here, it's pointless. Like, life is pointless. There's no point in going. So therefore, it's a case of like, just finish it now, done, check out, bye bye life, we're over. Or move. And
Hmm.
move didn't mean necessarily activity or doing something. It just meant take a step.
Yeah.
And that's really, I suppose, the key is one step and then another step. And it doesn't matter necessarily how long you take for those steps, but as long as there are steps and you take them eventually. For me, there was only so long I could basically sit in that space and not do anything. And perhaps that makes me a bit more action oriented than others. I don't, and this is where I don't really have the answer, but it just became untenable to stay there.
Hmm.
Um, And it really was a choice of, well, don't bother or get off your butt and do something. And it's
Yeah.
that choice that then drove me to one step and then another step and then another step. And not all those steps are right, and they don't
Yeah.
have to be. They just have to be steps, because you can always course correct. You can take the path less traveled. You can double back and take the path most traveled. You can create a whole new path, um, and go around in circles, but you're still moving and it's still activity. And the more you do that, the more of a habit it becomes. And so the further away you can slowly move from that place of nothing, um, and eventually and hopefully see your way through to a place where you can be content or even be happy or satisfied in some manner of speaking. And that's a definition you need to create for yourself as well. And I think that's where some of the 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 current issues with the depression and anxiety that people are suffering is because the picture they had is no longer the picture they can have. And so we get
Yeah.
really attached to that picture, and we lose focus on the fact that we can create a new picture and we can have a different interpretation of content or happy that doesn't necessarily look like the one previous, but is still able to provide some satisfaction in life. And so a part of that whole journey is giving up attachments.
Yeah.
Like when I was diagnosed with arthritis, I had to give up any attachment to any kind of life that I had planned for myself, because nothing that I had planned was going to look like that ever again.
Hmm.
That's like when you're 19 and you've got your whole future planned ahead of you and it looks like this, and then to just, bitch slap by life going, no, what do you do? And so, yeah, so attachment, I think, is another thing to kind of really look at. And it's not about being detached and disassociated, but kind of letting go so closely of that vision that is no longer possible, and allowing for new possibilities and vision to manifest in your life. And don't be afraid of it, but also equally don't push it away.
Yeah, and
I
I think
suppose
that can
that's,
be applied to sort of anything in our life in that, you kind of had this picture of what you think it's going to look like, and maybe what you should be doing,
yep,
and
or you
what's
should be doing.
expected.
Mm,
Exactly, exactly. Or what's expected of you, through external sources or culture,
yep.
or whatever that looks like. And to pave
Mm.
your own way, it really is just one step at a time. Feeling it out as you go, making adjustments. So it's
Redoing it
not
a couple of
always,
times,
yeah,
yeah.
it's not always going to be a straight path, and usually where you end up is not where you anticipated you were going to be, and that's
Mhm.
okay. That's the journey.
Absolutely. Well, before my diagnosis and all the rest of it, I was actually accepted into the Australian Defence Force Academy for aeronautical engineer,
Yeah.
which is, dream kind of career, planes, building like jets and stuff like that. It was fantastic. Um, and unfortunately, my health obviously was going to be a big preventative. And so, so that's the path I didn't end up taking. And, I kind of 30 years later, you look back and go, wow, how different would my life have been had that path been available? Had I taken that path? Had I made different choices? And that's where I kind of go with the attachment like that. Excuse me. Yes, it would have been totally different. And, that was a dream back then, but I would never have had the 30 years I've had if that path had been the path I'd taken. And that's where that giving up attachment to what could have been, and embracing what is, and then allowing for what's possible. So, yeah, and I never would have met the people, I never would have had the experiences I've had. It just, life is meant to be a journey, and I think life is meant to be discovered, not planned and plotted within an inch of its life, so to speak. There really needs, I think, and this is, I think, what's missing in a lot of schooling and training, is that flexibility of, it's okay not to know, and it's okay to be surprised, and it's okay to change, and it's okay for it not to be what you thought it was. That doesn't mean it's wrong.
Yeah.
um, but we get kind of caught up in these labels and these boxes, and like you said, the society's expectation of should and must and have, and this is what the perfect life looks like, particularly with the rise of social media, and Insta lives, we kind of get really attached to what it looks like, and we forget that what it feels like is actually far more important.
Yeah, and potentially it's somebody, you know, sitting at a window with a toilet lid, pretending they're on a plane.
I know, that's such a good meme, isn't it? It's just so true, so appropriate.
Oh, and honestly, it's our life experiences that not only make us stronger and more resilient, but make us inspirations to those coming behind us, you know,
Yeah,
sharing our stories, sharing our trials and tribulations, you know, figuring out, okay, well, this is really my purpose. As much as I've been through, you know, all of that, this is obviously why I'm still here and why I've taken the journey that I have. Do you
yeah.
find that your experience really comes into how you work with your clients?
Yes, and that, like the statement that you opened up with, that's why I say I'm the sum of my experiences, not the result of my circumstances. Because people, again, think that what they went through in their childhood or their early teens or their early 20s or the big life event that kind of stopped them in their tracks is the be all and end all. And so, part of what I do try and use in expanding, with clients and looking for, what's possible is that detachment from, well, yes, that's what it looks like. If you can let go of what it's supposed to be, let's see what we can create about what might be. Um, and a lot of that has to do with the confidence as well. Like a lot of people, like that's all I know. That's the only place I've been comfortable, so I want to stay there. We are very attached to comfort, security, and all of those
Mm.
things. And letting go of and detaching and having it be unknown is terrifying for us as human beings unless we practice it.
Yes.
Um, and that's where you're sort of talking about resilience. And everything we do is a practice, and that's where I think that's a really healthy way of looking at it. If life is just a practice, and today I'm going to practice fun, tomorrow I'm going to practice happiness, the next day I'm going to practice resilience, and we kind of don't get attached to today I have to be happy and tomorrow I have to be resilient. There's a difference in the pressure we're not only applying to ourselves, but there's a difference in the flexibility we can apply if it's just a practice, because we
Mm.
can practice something different and we can alter based on the circumstances. Because, what I planned for today hasn't necessarily been how it's rolled, but I'm still here and I'm still engaged and I'm still with process and I'm still able to enjoy that even though it's not ideal necessarily. So it's yeah, it practice. That's a really underutilized word, I think. And people see practice as not experienced and amateur and not yet qualified. And practice is kind of the antithesis to guru and expert and all that sort of thing. But you know what? I can be an expert while still practicing.
Absolutely.
Um, it's just about changing that perception and not being so rigid in the attachment and the belief of what things mean and how they influence us.
Absolutely. I mean, you just look at how things have changed in our lifetimes, you know, but you and I probably both grew up in a time when there was no such thing as internet. And
Mobile
now look at
phones
us
were
all.
not even a thing. Yep.
Exactly. Now look at us all, you know, just zooming and stream yarding and
Yep.
doing day to day online.
Yeah, and like our childhood, there's nothing like this, at
No.
all. I remember having to go down to the corner store and get on the phone to call a friend after school because,
Yeah.
we didn't even have a phone in our house, let alone any of the technology that's available to us now. And I kind of, think of my grandparents' age and how much more they've seen because they've lived through wars and, stuff that we don't even really have a comprehension of. And I think that's a lot of what is a part of the pressure we're all feeling right now is because life moves so quickly now.
Yeah.
Everything's instant, everything's accessible, everything can really overwhelm you because you're trying to stay connected and imported and informed and instead of just kind of being in that moment and allowing for like yep, the rest of the world's out there, lots of stuff going on, but right now, where am I, who am I, and what am I choosing to do, be, and have right now? and the rest of it doesn't matter so much. It's just kind of background noise. Um, yeah, so it's a fascinating time to be alive, isn't it? With what we've got currently happening, let alone with sort of the changes that we've seen in the last 20 to 30 years. And I think that's why conversations about confidence and resilience and these sorts of things are becoming far more important, and people are looking for this stuff because they're not skills that are taught anymore, and
No.
also they're not skills that are learned through life anymore. Like our grandparents learned this because of the environment and the atmosphere they grew up in, which is vastly different to even our experiences, let alone so the newer generations. And it's a case of coming back to some of those really core skills that have been lost through the pace of life. um, and taking time to have a look at what resilience is and practice it before we actually need it, which, funnily enough, was a podcast I was on earlier today talking about that. Practicing contentment with what we have instead of the aspirational what we think we should have. I think these are skills that are going to really be valuable in supporting people in the coming years.
Absolutely. And one of the words that just came out of your mouth was choice. And I think
Mm.
that is really a really big thing to hold on to, because everything at the end of the day is our choice, and we can choose to be bitter or we can choose to be better. So it's
Yes.
however you want to look at it.
Excuse me. Yes. And I think that's a big part of the problem. Like, I know personally, I've experienced it. Like, I'm a woman who's curated her own life, manifested all this amazing stuff through choice, action, um, and fully living in that kind of space of choice. And what the last year has done is removed that choice for a lot of us. We haven't had
Mm.
choices in visiting people or pushing business, or even whether our business is still current, relevant, and open. And I've been a part of a university study that's looking at the impact on small business. And it's overwhelmingly people like me, and no doubt, a lot of women in my space, the entrepreneurial, take charge, manifesting, making stuff happen, who are actually feeling it the most because of that loss of choice.
Yes.
Because we're used to creating, we're used to manifesting, we're used to kind of going out and going, this is what I want, and taking the steps and actions towards it. And that's been really restricted in the last year. And so for our mindsets, that's a really big conflict, because
Yes.
our whole practice is around that. And then to externally have that reduced, that also goes against our values and our beliefs. However, it's a very real thing. And
Yeah.
that's, I think, when we started talking about some of the depression and anxiety, that's also contributing to it. So it's about how do we change for ourselves in those ways and still use all those great skills within the new confinements that we have, and still kind of create that satisfying, fulfilling life that we dream of. And that's not, I don't have an answer to that yet. I'm still kind of in that space myself of, I love being on stage. I love public speaking, and I haven't been able to do that for a year.
Yeah.
Which is why podcasts are great, because we all stay connected, but still, I see you and me. I don't see an audience, which is,
That's
part
right.
of what I love. Um, even like writers, actors, there's so many people who've been affected and their dreams are not available to them. And collectively, that is almost beyond comprehension for the impact on that. But there will be a way through it, and that's what we've all got to start co-creating, I think. And conversations like these and being able to stay connected. Like, think if we'd gone through this 20 years ago when there was no internet and Zoom, trying to do this on dial-up. Good lord,
Oh,
it wouldn't happen. And you can, like,
yeah.
I kind of go, there's a moment to take to be grateful that we have this technology, that we can actually still stay connected in
Yes.
this space and time. And it wasn't 20 years ago, because imagine how horrifying that would be.
Oh, the fear.
Um,
Can you imagine?
absolutely, the loss of connection and all the rest of it is just beyond comprehension. So it's finding those small pieces of gratitude and reminding us that, you know, we do have this ability to still stay in touch and connect and still build in other ways. And it's just about, again, having that resilience and practicing something, trying something different, giving up attachment to what it did look like, and trying to create a new vision of what it could look like. Um, and that, like I said, that's not easy. And I'm not taking away from anyone who, is in the grips of some really significant mental health moments at the moment because it's tough, and we're all feeling it.
Yeah.
So that's why I kind of go, conversations like this hopefully can only help support and give people hope and new ideas, and kind of inspire them to just take one step.
Exactly. And it's that being flexible. It's you know that all the fear that's been prevailed because people have suddenly lost control of what they thought they had control of,
Yep.
with the pandemic, and we've seen it with leaderships in different
Oh,
countries,
yep.
but it's that loss of control and that
Hmm.
fear that people are feeling, but they're not just going, okay, well, this isn't working, let's just take one step at a time and be really flexible with it, and see where we end up.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's not human nature. That's a
Yeah.
practice.
Yeah.
And that control, absolutely. Like, I'm a control freak. I'm a project manager on site. I've project managed $500 million jobs. For me to lose control on decision making of where I can go every day is, let alone everything else. And I can, like, my business isn't necessarily needed to be out in the public, and I don't necessarily have to be, even though I quite enjoy it. But travel businesses, tourism, and retail, and all those people who have that vision and that's their space. I can only imagine their mental space. And again,
Yeah.
it's just a case of, like, feel it, understand it, get it, have the pity party, feel it's okay to feel the loss of it, but when
Yeah.
you're ready, take a step towards a new vision, and just like you said, see what you can create, and see what you can phoenix and rise out of the ashes, and kind of 2.0 or 3.0, or whatever manifestation you're up to, because we all go through several in our lives if we're doing self development. um and just try. And I think that's the thing too, is we've just got to keep trying. Giving up, as I said, when we started the conversation, is not an option for me, and it's not an option for a lot of women in the entrepreneurial space. We're just not built that way to give up. But
Mm.
removing attachment from what was, and kind of looking to the future for what is possible, and the choices within that is really, the new focus that, I think, is going to help us all get through and get out of this funk,
Yeah.
and kind of allow us all to move on, regardless of the external control that we're kind of feeling the lack of at the moment.
Yes, absolutely. It's the businesses that have, really had that time and space and that vision to go, okay, well, what we were doing isn't going to work in this current environment. What can we do to pivot? And you've seen, gin distilleries turn into hand sanitizing
Yeah.
distilleries, and they've kept afloat. Whereas the people that have gone, oh, I can't deal with this, I can't work with this, they're the ones that have just closed the doors.
Yeah. Yeah, and hopefully, they'll see their way through to coming back with a new vision, or they'll find a place where their skills can be of value. But I think we've got a bit longer to go before we're gonna
Yeah.
get back to a stability that we've become very complacent and comfortable with, and we may never get back to that either, which is something I
Mm.
think we're not collectively as a population prepared for. I think everyone's still just kind of waiting. It's like, oh, shit, it's been a year, aren't we there yet? We're
Yes.
waiting for old normal to come back, and we're all sick of the new normal. But I think part of taking power back is co-creating this new normal.
Yeah.
Instead of being attached to old normal, let's call this normal and co-create the normal that we want out of it.
Absolutely. So this new normal is never going back to the old normal. It's going to be
Correct.
a new normal, and it's whatever we
Yeah.
make it.
Yeah, and that's where I think, women have a lot of power and a lot of, capability in the space, because we're so used to being flexible and adapting, and have a little bit more of that ability to pivot. I'm not really fond of that word. I've heard it too much in the last year, but be able to kind of go, oh, look, I'm going to drop everything and go over here. Women have a bit more of that skill, I feel.
Multitasking.
Exactly. So I really think this is our time to shine in that co-creation of what does our normal look like? What do we collectively want it to look like? And what can we do to support other women to get there? And we see it on some of the Facebook groups, because I know you and I are in a lot of the women's groups, and when it's positive and everyone's supporting, it's fantastic, and so much fantastic action comes out of it. that, if we can harness that more, and as I said, and actively co-create with each other, I think there's a lot of amazing changes that can come out of this for our society.
Absolutely. And I think it's given everybody the opportunity to reassess their values and make them a priority. I've
Yep.
seen mums that have just gone, you know what, I'm taking my kids camping. I've never done it before, but hey, why not?
I've got
I
to
can
spend
do
the
this.
time with them, and we're here, and we can. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah. And it's making that time and space to go, okay, what do I value? Like, okay, yeah, I might have valued traveling before, but we live in a country that's fairly much COVID free, and we have the ability to go wherever we want and do whatever we want still.
And having traveled around a lot of Australia, it's an amazing country. Like, there is
Absolutely.
so much out there that we don't understand and know and appreciate if we haven't crossed borders in our own country. Like, I come from West Australia. I've traveled around South Australia, New South Wales, Queensland, Northern Territory. I haven't done a lot of Victoria, but that's because it's cold
Yeah.
a lot of the time down there. But I have been skiing down there, which is probably why I'm like, that's the memory. I'm like, oh no. Um, there's some amazing, beautiful, incredible, stunning, iconic places. No matter where you travel in Australia, and I actively like, get out there, support our country, go to small country towns, put some money into them because they really, really need it. Buy a tea towel, because it'll help someone. Go to the local restaurants and talk to the locals and hang out and just kind of discover other Australians, because we have, particularly city-wise, become very insular and very used to, I'm just going to jump on a plane and go overseas. I think now is the time to support our country, and it's a brilliant country to see. I couldn't list the amount of places I've been, and all of them have merit, and I'd go back again. But there's still so many places I haven't seen that I kind of don't want. I don't like going to the same place again, because, like, well, I've been there, I need a new one.
Yeah.
So Tasmania and Victoria are on my list at some point. Yeah, and yeah, absolutely. Like, this is the new stuff. This is the opportunity in the restriction, the lack of attachments. That, well, yeah, I wanted to go to Greece for my next holiday. It's not going to happen anytime soon, I don't think.
Yeah.
So what else can I do? Where is Greece in Australia? I'm sure I can find somewhere that's going to give me a similar feel if I'm looking for the beachy coastal kind of stuff. I've been told that Ocean Road in Victoria, it's probably a beautiful place to visit. So, I'm going to give that a crack instead. And that's the opportunity in the adversity that we have here at the moment, and comes down to making different choices and allowing that to be okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. And
Mm.
it gives us the chance to rediscover our own community and find more value in that as
Yeah,
well. So I think that's, a really important thing for us to do as Australians as well, is to be able to, you know, find value in our own backyard.
yeah, absolutely.
Well, Becky, it's been great having you on the show. I'm so inspired by your journey.
Thank you. I was going to say, we've covered quite a lot of topics actually in the discussion, which is always the way when we get talking. With when I get talking with powerful women and women who are into that entrepreneurial space, we kind of, we cover everything and we look at everything, and everything's interesting and everything has merit. And I think that's the key to living a good life, is be open to everything being of interest and of value in some way. And looking for that allows you to look for the positive, and take that one step closer to doing, being, and having the success that we're all after. So, no, it's been great talking to you. I'm sure we could talk a lot more. We've barely scratched the surface of half the stuff we could cover.
I know, right? I know.
Mm.
Becky, our listeners, if they're looking for you, where can they find you?
So Facebook, Becky Paroz, or yeah, Becky Paroz. I've got a coaching page, which is Get Your Boots On. A tribute to my construction, my favorite piece of clothing. Excuse me. My writer page is Facebook at Planet Beckstar, or Words of Beck. And my website, yeah, www.wordsofbeck.com.au. Same as the name of my book, which I can, little plug, always get it in the camera there. Yeah, so that's my Insta handle, that's my website. You can look me up. I say hi, ask me any more questions, and yeah, the book's available in print or on Amazon as an ebook if you're interested in that question of how do I decide that I'm worthy?
Yes, excellent. It's such a good lesson that we all need to learn. So thank you so much for sharing your story. And if you want to get in touch with Becky, the links, they'll be in the show notes. So jump over to leoniebolt.com/podcast and I'll have all of Becky's links there as well. Thanks so much for being on the show, Becky.
Thanks for having me, Leonie. It's been great.
Thank you for listening to the Empowered to Shine podcast. My name's Leonie Bolt, and I'm glad that you were able to join us today. I hope you got some serious inspiration from today's episode. If you'd like to find more episodes, go to leoniebolt.com/podcasts or start subscribing on your favorite podcast streaming channel. I look forward to seeing you again soon.